Introducing Minor Wisdom Quintet.
1, 2, a skidadidadoo.
Minor Wisdom.
Happy Father's Day to everybody out there. Hope everybody did something to sort of commemorate and celebrate Juneteenth as well. This week on the podcast, I have Mr. Kyle Martin. Kyle is somebody that used to actually have his own podcast and just stopped doing it after about 2 years or so I guess my time is up pretty soon. But he did a very similar format to me. He was actually around before I was, but would interview theater teachers, and I was actually on his podcast when I first started Minor Wisdom, and so Kyle and I sort of started a relationship then, and here he is having his own episode for Minor Wisdom. Again, I hope everybody's enjoying their Father's Day. There's a comedian out there, I believe his name is Mo Sadiq. I think it's Mo Sadiq, but I could be wrong, but don't hold me to that. But anyway, Mo, he actually came to Dulles High School when I was there because Fort Bend hired him to be one of the sort of launch people for the school year. You know, all these districts have like leadership launch and all this kind of stuff. Well, Mo was hired by Fort Bend to be one of these people to come out and do some educational comedy and things like that. Comedy about education, shall we say, not necessarily educational comedy. And he was very funny, but he's a national comedian. He's a nationally renowned stand-up comedian, and there's a bit out there about how Father's Day is like the 20th most celebrated American holiday, and starts listing off certain things that are celebrated more than Father's Day. But you know, regardless, I appreciate it. I know my kids, my daughters have made me some special things, so I hope everybody's having a good Father's Day. You know, Father's Day used to be a kind of sucky holiday for the Minor family because my father passed away 15 years ago, and so until I had kids, I didn't really like Father's Day. And so I kind of get both ends of the straw here and understand how some people might not be feeling it and some people are appreciative of it. So however you feel, I hope this is either a great Sunday or just, random day for you, however it might be. Looking forward to Thespian Professional Development coming up this week. But until then, leave me a 5-star review, maybe like the podcast, follow me on Twitter, and like me on Facebook or follow me on Facebook. Enjoy, Kyle Martin.
So I was born into kind of a theatrical family. My dad was a theater teacher before I was born. And then for about the first year of my life, he was a theater teacher and in Baytown, Texas at Lee High School. And we did community theater too. Like he had grown up doing community theater at the Baytown Little Theater, and we lived in Baytown, and that was like kind of a second home for me. We would go to church and then go to rehearsals. It was like kind of like, and I later in life started to think of myself as having been raised by two churches, like the church of the Jesus Church and then also the theater church. And so, yeah, that was just like a big part of my life growing up was the theater. Got into high school, was in the marching band. We had a really, really, really strong, successful marching band. But I also did do some shows in high school. I did 2 one-act plays and a musical, but it was like not something I could fit into my schedule, but it was still something that I knew that theater was probably going to be where I ended up and not band. I was always very mediocre at the trumpet. But anyway, so I ended up going to Abilene Christian University to major in theater, and had a great 4 years there. Kind of found a few different things that I really loved doing while I was there. Aside from just acting, I learned a little bit about lighting, learned about directing, and learned about playwriting. And then, after college, worked at the Dallas Theater Center as an intern for a little bit. But most of the time, the funny thing is when I was at the Dallas Theater Center, I would be there. I remember specifically running the winch system that would lower the Ghost of Christmas Present down to the floor. It was Liz. I don't. People from Dallas will know Liz Michael, who's a company member at the Dallas Theater Center, and that was before they had company, uh, a resident company at the Dallas Theater Center. But she was the Ghost of Christmas Present. I remember specifically, like, I was in charge of running that winch. I don't know why they had me do that. I was probably the wrong idea, but and just thinking, like, I kind of wish I were running my own theater program. Like, I wish I was like daydreaming about going into a high school and teaching, and that had always been something I had wanted to do through high school. I always thought I'd be a theater teacher, but then I don't know if other people can relate to this, but you get into college, and especially if it's a program that's really focused on training actors, and training you and trying to train you for the real world of professional theater. I just get caught up into that and sort of forgot that I was also planning to be a theater teacher until I got into the real world and realized, wait, I don't know if I have the whatever it is to like force myself to go be an actor and struggle like that, and maybe not have a paycheck for a while. So I started substitute teaching and working on my certification, and eventually got hired in Channelview, Texas. Was my first job. I went to go work with Catherine Dowler, who is still there. She's been there for a long time. Went and worked with her for a year. And I really liked it. I really enjoyed working with Catherine there. I liked the kids. But the principal called me in and said, "Hey, we want you to get certified to teach English because we need more English teachers, and we don't need you to be teaching theater as much." And about that same time, my high school where I graduated from, Baytown Sterling, the theater teacher called me and was like, "Hey, there's a job opening if you're interested." Yeah, and she knew me through my family and my dad, and so I was like, "Well, I'd rather teach full theater than have to teach English." And I've always I've always been like, I'm theater is really the only thing I care about. I mean, I love the kids. I've had to learn how to be a good teacher, because it was not something that came naturally to me. The directing part of it, and the I think I've heard you talk about being, like you're either like a director or a classroom teacher, and I totally know what you mean by that, because I know so many people who are amazing in the classroom, and there's me who I treat the classroom like hey, here's a project, go do it, and then I'll tell you what you're doing wrong. Um, but but anyway, so yeah, I went to Baytown Sterling, was there for 3 years. I was really fortunate to work with a lady who had, kind of she kind of just let me do whatever I wanted. She didn't really. She had a kind of a smaller program. She did 2 shows a year, and I was like, "What if we did a musical?" And she hadn't been doing musicals, and she was like, "Yeah, go ahead, do it." And she hadn't really been involved in Texas Thespians, and my first experience with Thespians was at Channelview, and I came to Sterling and was like, "What if we started a thespian troupe?" And she was like, "Yeah, go for it." And so I kind of really, with the safety of not being the head director, got to kind of do a bunch of stuff that a head director might do. And she wasn't terribly interested in doing a lot of that stuff. She wanted to teach her classes and direct plays, which is fine, but she let me, and so any little whim I had, I pretty much got greenlit, which was really nice. I didn't have to come in and have somebody go, "Nah, that's not the way we do things here." After 3 years at that school, my wife, who's also a teacher, she teaches elementary school, and we decided we wanted to live in the big city. We didn't have kids yet, so we wanted to feel like we were, cool urbanites, and so we moved into Houston. And we lived around in the Rice Village area, found an apartment we could not afford. but we, found a way to make it work for whatever reason. And I traveled. That was my first year at Travis. I got a job as my as the head theater teacher at Travis High School, where you've also spent some time, and in Fort Bend. And that was my first of 4 years there. And that was another kind of leap into learning about how to run a program. Like I said, I didn't really have a an example when I was in high school of of a theater program and how to run a theater program, because I didn't I did some shows, but I wasn't really that involved in theater. So I was actually kind of modeling it after my college theater program, which uh, I think I've heard other people say that they've done that before, that they kind of run their theater like I think I've heard Billy Dragoo say that he runs his like a professional theater company. Um and so that was kind of what I was trying to do as well. Um and then obviously some things you can't quite treat it just like a professional theater company. You don't have one of my favorite stories to tell is my first day of teaching. This was back when I was at Channelview. One of my first day of teaching, I just went around the circle, like I got the kids together, and I was like, "Hey, so tell me what you love about theater, or tell me what drew you to theater, what caused you to choose this class as your elective." And unfortunately, I don't remember any of the good answers. I only remember this one kid, and I remember this was kind of emblematic of a lot of the answers. Uh, I had a kid who just looked at me and was like, "I don't want to be here. Like, they made me take this class. I don't want to be here. What do you like?" As if to say, like, "What's wrong with you? Why would like that's a crazy question to ask." But that was sort of a wake up call. And so of course, it's not always as simple as just going like, yeah, we're gonna run this like a professional theater program, and because everybody wants to be there, and it's not always the case. But I try to do that as much as I can. And that was sort of something I was able to develop at Travis, or at least I tried. Um, we had we did 4 shows a year there. Fall show, musical, one act, and then student directed plays. Really loved the kids at Travis. I got, the parents were really, really supportive. I never, taught in an environment like that before, and I still haven't since, where the kids were just really, really focused on theater. And I didn't have to do a lot of sharing. Like, there wasn't a whole lot of sharing. Those kids were pretty focused on theater. I don't know if it's the same way. It was almost a brand new school when I taught
Yeah,
there.
it's still pretty young. Yeah.
Yeah, I taught there the second year it was open. There was another theater teacher there when it opened, and then she, I think, decided that she wanted to teach English, and so she, you know, gravitated over towards just teaching English. But yeah, it was a really fantastic group that I had. I still keep in touch with a lot of those kids. In fact, one of those kids I was telling you before we started recording, it just got a job teaching in Keller, teaching with Tim Monroe's son, who you
Yeah.
had on your show. And yeah, I still keep in touch with him. Still keep in touch with a lot of those kids. Formed some great relationships. Unfortunately, after my 4th year there, I was still kind of I was still a department of one, and I was feeling burned out. And it was like one of those things where I was just like working constantly. I used to say I loved my job, but I didn't like it anymore. And so an opportunity came to move back to Abilene, which is where my wife is from. Her dad had just retired as an administrator there, but basically I got called by the principal of the high school and was like, we don't need a theater teacher, but we need somebody to help out in this program for kids who are needing to recover credit. It was through a computer program called Plato. A lot of people, when I tell them that I worked with Plato, they think I like worked with
Yeah.
clay.
Right. which could be
and
cool.
modeling and like,
Yeah,
hey, that's a class. That's
yeah.
awesome.
I mean,
That,
might be
but
something, or might be something to consider. Yeah,
yeah, maybe a Play-Doh class is something we need in Texas. But I went and worked with this computer program for a year. I did that. It was real. It was like one of those like I need a break from what I'd been doing. I was also working on my. I think I've heard you talk about you have your master's from San Angelo State. Is that right?
that's correct. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Never having set foot on
Right. Never been
campus.
there. Yeah.
That's my Lamar degree.
Yeah.
I have a degree from Lamar, a master's. Never set foot on the campus, but I was working on my master's online and stuff, and that kind of freed me up, gave me a little bit of time to work on that because it was kind of a nice year. I woke up late. I didn't have to be there till 11 o'clock. The hours were from 11 to 7. When I first heard that, I was like, 7, man. I'm used to being there from 7 to 7. So if I can go home at 7 and not have to be there till 11, that's great. Uh, it was still TRS and teacher stuff and all that, but it was a lot less stressful. Didn't have to do grades, didn't have to do any of that stuff. Just had to help kids recover credit. And but what while it was less time consuming and allowed me to kind of spend more time with my young daughter was about a year old when we moved. It was definitely one of those things that made me realize where I needed to be because I just missed directing so much. I missed theater, and so I started looking for theater jobs, and luckily for me, a job opened up at the rival high school across town, Cooper High School, and it was speech and theater. So I got to do the whole like speech teacher slash theater teacher for a while, which was something I'd always heard but never had been interested in doing myself. But it was actually a lot of fun. I had these one semester courses where I just taught speech, and I learned a lot about speech myself because I didn't know anything, anything really about it. They just think because you're a theater person and you can talk that makes you good at, I guess, speeches, but I don't know if that's necessarily the case. Um, but anyway, so I was there for 5 years. Eventually, I was a third theater teacher. They had a head theater teacher, they had an assistant theater teacher, and then they had me basically helping, like, because they didn't have a full day of speech classes, which was really what I was hired to do. They kind of went, well, you can go help with the tech theater classes. Well, it became pretty obvious right away that I knew the most about technical theater, and I basically told the head director, who was also new at that high school at the time, I was like, let me handle the tech, let me handle the lights and building, not so much the sound. Sound is not really my thing, but let me handle all that. Let me take that off your plate. And he was a little bit hesitant at first. I think he was like, I don't know, I kind of like things to be done a certain way. But after we had worked together on a few shows, he was like, yes, you do it. Was there for 5 years, and then the Abilene High theater teacher retired, and I went to our fine arts director and I said, this guy, I want if he was retiring, I would love to be considered for that job. And they said, yeah, we want you to do that. So I've been here for 4 years now. I just graduated my first group that went with me the whole year, the whole way through. And it's been pretty fantastic. I've really loved being at this school. I've learned a lot about how to not burn out, because when I was at Travis, that was the thing. I just worked and worked and worked and worked. Every time the kids, I remember telling the kids one day I just needed a Saturday off because we didn't have a whole lot of tech classes. I had one tech period a day, and so we would spend every Saturday on work calls. And I remember one day just being like, I can't be there this Saturday. I've got something to do. And the kids were just like, well, what are we supposed to do? And I'm like, I don't care. It's a Saturday. Go live your life. But that was just kind of, that became so normal at Travis, was to work every single day. And Sundays were the only really day that I had. And of course, if we were doing a Sunday matinee, I didn't even have those. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, that's kind of that's kind of how I got here, where I am today, and I've got a great theater support here. Our fine arts programs here in Abilene are really great. I work really well with our choir and band, and put on a huge musical every year. Musicals here in Abilene are incredible, mainly because we have really incredible choirs, and so they send us, for the musical. We just, pack in all these kids, and that's one of the things I've noticed whenever you do a musical with theater kids who can sing, versus choir kids, is that, the first time I was at a rehearsal for it was like maybe one of the first rehearsals for our musicals here in Abilene, and I heard, the sound they were making, and I was just blown away. And of course, the choir director was like, "All right, we've got some work to do." And I'm like, "Do you?" Like that was. I mean, they know how to blend,
Yeah.
and they know how to support, and theater kids who can sing, but are strictly theater kids. They can sound good, but there's a different level when you're filling out your chorus with choir kids who've been in choir since they were, in sixth grade. And
Yeah.
anyway, so that's kind of where we're at. That's
You
kind
need
of where
you
I'm
need
at.
to do Hunchback. That's
Yeah, dude.
if you have
I ha-
singers. Yeah.
Well, okay, so I think I contacted you about my student who's going to be going to U of H
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
their theater teaching program. Before the end of school one day, because they knew I was contemplating the musical,
Yeah.
and he came up to me and he was like, I got to tell you this before I leave. You've got to do Hunchback.
You got
And he's like, it's perfect. You don't even have. He's like, you don't even have to have all these choir kids at
Yeah.
rehearsal the whole time.
Yeah.
He was
It's in
telling
the
me,
back. Yeah.
yeah, and I was like, okay, that sounds interesting. That's interesting. He said, only problem is there's only one girl in the whole show.
Yeah. Yeah. One
And
actor. Yeah. 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 One.
yeah,
Yeah.
and we have that's one of the things that I don't know. There's a few things that I'm like, I don't know how to fix this. I
Yeah.
don't even know if this is something I can fix. I think everybody has that issue, like
Yeah.
having an imbalance of girls and guys.
Yeah.
Right now is the most imbalanced.
Right.
With my school now is the most imbalanced. This year I had 10 seniors who graduated, and of those 10 seniors, 11 of them, when that was 9 of them.
I'm glad
Well,
you're not
no.
a math. I'm glad you're not a math teacher. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's start over. Oh, hey, you know how you were saying that if I offend anybody, you can like
Yeah.
cut it out.
Yeah.
Can you also like
Sure.
look smarter?
I can make you sound really smart. I don't know if I'm going to cut that out because it was a good laugh, but we'll
No, leave it in.
of my 10 seniors, 11 of them. Yeah. That was good.
No, so of the 10 seniors, 8 of them
There you go.
were girls, and very talented girls.
Yeah.
Like any of them could have been a lead, and we would have had a fantastic show. And then 2 boys who were also both talented, but like that imbalance. I was like, so yeah, I'm always trying to find those shows. So this year we did Little Women.
Yeah. Okay.
And we double cast the
Yeah.
sisters and the mom.
Yeah.
So basically we could have 12 female leads, and last year we did Oklahoma, which was tough. It's not necessarily a female heavy show, but it had some really good featured parts for females.
What type of version did you do for Oklahoma? Like, did you do the more traditional?
Yeah, we did the only one that Concord sends you.
Well, yeah, but you can sort of through design and such kind of
Yeah.
adapt it to become what has become popular on Broadway. They're
Right.
sort of
The darker version.
Yeah.
So we tried to incorporate elements of that.
Yeah,
For
okay.
instance, spoiler alert, the
Yeah.
death of Judd.
Yeah. I might have to
we
cut
tried
that
to
out. We'll
keep-
see. We'll see what kind of listeners we have. I might have to cut that part out. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you don't know how Oklahoma ends, beware. But the death of Judd, at the end, we kept kind of ambiguous. We didn't make it so clear cut. We didn't have blood splattering on the white wedding
Right.
dress. We
Right.
didn't do that, but we did try to keep the did he fall on his knife or did Curly kill him? We kind of kept that open.
Yeah. And
Um,
did you have like the Law and Order sound effect happen at any point, or nothing like that? Nothing too cheesy, right? No.
no,
Okay.
no. Although now I wish I could go back and edit it.
Yeah.
Some,
Well.
but yeah, I know. And then our Edo Annie, who was fantastic, was like, Mr. Martin, can we start Can't Say No, like the way that they do it in Broadway, where they kind of slow it down and kind of draw it out a little bit. And I was like, yeah. And we use a live pit orchestra, and we mix students with professionals. So Abilene, you wouldn't think would have like a ton of professional musicians, but we have 3 universities here,
Right.
and they all have music departments. So we kind of pull from there and pull from our own music faculty and have about a half and half, half professional, half student pit, and it always sounds fantastic. But of course, anytime you're going to try to do something like that, your conductor and everybody has to, sometimes in theater, I'm sure you've noticed this before. Sometimes in theater, we get a wild hair and we take it to people who we need help from, like a music person or something like that. And you go, hey, I want to do this, but I want to do it differently. And they sit back and they go, it's like they never even occurred to them that you would do it anyway different. So there was a little bit of that. Fortunately, our music people all went along and are great about following my wild hairs. And
Yeah.
but yeah, we were able to do a little bit of that stuff throughout with the music. But because we also are using this it's a fine arts musical. It's not just a theater musical. We want to try to incorporate as many of the band kids as possible, as many of the different departments. And so we're not going to, I didn't want to strip it down. We're doing Oklahoma. We weren't going to strip it down to like a banjo and a guitar, which is, I think, what they did for Broadway.
Yeah. Yeah. It did.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. It was a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be. I'd always avoided classic musicals because I've always been one of these, like, I like the grittier, newer stuff. I like newer musicals in general. My favorite musicals are like, not that it's super new, but it's not. But I've always loved Pippin and Les Mis and one of my Hamilton. I love like the newer stuff, and so I've always gravitated more towards that stuff. But this was like my challenge. I was like, I need to be able to say, yes, I can direct Rodgers and Hammerstein. And so I I think the show it had been a long time since Abilene High had done a musical in that classic kind of vein. We did Drowsy, my first year at Abilene High, we did Drowsy Chaperone. And we would always joke about how, and I told them about how the Drowsy Chaperone kind of makes fun of older musicals that are sometimes really inappropriate and really not suitable for a modern audience. And that's where the joke about the Japanese stuff came from. And so after, I'm sure you've experienced this, but as soon as you're done with one show or like one musical, they're like, what are we doing next year?
Yeah, they want to.
Like, So I just got to where I told them, because I think I'd mentioned at some point that I would never, because of the sensitivities and because of the kind of weirdness around it, I didn't think I'd ever do The King and I. It's not my favorite musical to begin with, but I was just like, I don't even want to touch that. That would just be too difficult to navigate, I think, with at a school that's, mostly white kids. And but every time they asked what musical we were doing, I just went ahead and said we were doing The King and I. And they eventually figured out I was joking. But for the last 4 years, the joke is we're doing The King and I.
That was your go-to. Yeah. That's fun.
But
So, well,
Mhm.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was, but Oklahoma was just one of those that I thought that it was because it had just been on Broadway. There was some new interest for it, but it's also the quintessential Rodgers and Hammerstein classic musical era. We did the whole ballet and everything. I have this fantastic dancer who's she's going to be a senior this year, so even when she was a sophomore, she was an amazing dancer. We had to go out and find a boy who could do ballet, which was a challenge, but we did. But we did the whole ballet. We cut a little bit, but not much. And so yeah, that was one of those things that I was like, if I ever do, an old style musical, I'm just cutting that whole thing out.
Yeah.
'Cause
Did-
but it was part of the challenge to see if you could, to do that with it.
Yeah. Did you choreograph the ballet?
Heck no.
No. Okay. I was
Uh,
just.
no, we've got a fantastic choreographer who I worked with in college. She was the choreographer for all of our musicals when I was in college, and she also like taught dance to my wife when she was a little kid, and she's been choreographing the Abilene High musicals since before I knew anything about, so she's kind of our go-to. And it was an easy decision when I first came there to hire her. Her name's Terry Wilkerson, and she owns a dance studio here in town.
Okay.
And anyway, she's our choreographer. And anytime I choose a show, if it's got a lot of dancing, I contact her and I'm like, what do you think? Is this good? Can we do this? And speaking of wild hairs, I thought it'd be really cool to do An American in Paris, which is it's a new stage version of the old musical from I think it's Gene Kelly, I believe, the movie musical.
Yeah, the movie one. Yeah.
And I just listened to the music, and I love that music, especially the instrumental stuff, like the Rhapsody in Blue and all that. I love that. And I read the script, but I also watched a little bit of the Broadway version, but I didn't watch the whole thing. And I asked her, I was like, so what do you think? And she was like, we just don't have the guys who can do that kind of stuff. I mean, and I was like, okay, I understand. Well, then I finally went back and watched the whole thing, and it's not just like that 12-minute, 15-minute ballet in the middle of Oklahoma. It's like one spot in the middle. They've like take that, and there's like 5 or 6 of those throughout the musical that I just kind of was like, I guess, glossing over when I read the script. but yeah, so no, but she's fantastic, and I'm really happy to have and fortunate to have people. Abilene's one of those communities where kind of even though it definitely feels smaller, and you'd think in a bigger city, being in like Sugar Land or Houston, you've got all these resources around you, but it almost felt harder. There's less resources here, but the people that are here are like really willing to jump in and step in and be a part of, because we're the biggest high school in town. There's 3 high schools. There's us, Abilene, Wiley, and Cooper, and then lots of little towns around us. But people here really gravitate towards one of those high schools, or sometimes more than one of them. And I think because like in Sugar Land, there's like a 6A high school, on every block. It seems like
it's like Starbucks.
Yeah. And so it felt harder when I was in Sugar Land, and maybe I just didn't try hard enough. Maybe I just didn't know who to talk to, or I didn't have the confidence to ask, I guess. But it felt harder to find those resources. It felt really hard to like find a good choreographer who wouldn't just come and we could pay them to choreograph the musical, but that would really invest in it.
Yeah.
And like they would come in and like be as much a part. They weren't just a hired on person, but they were somebody who was as invested in the quality of the musical as everybody in the show. And again, I think probably I think what I was when I was in Houston, it seemed like the people who had the strongest musicals, the schools that had really strong musicals, maybe had somebody in house that they could work with.
Right.
Do you feel like
Yeah,
that's
no, it's
true?
100%. I mean, to go with your 6A comment, if you think about just the geography of how this area is set up, Fort Bend is next to Lamar Consolidated. Fort Bend is next to Alief ISD. Fort Bend's the east side of Fort Bend feeds into Houston ISD and into Pasadena, and all of those districts have 5 or 6A schools. I mean, back when you
Yeah,
were, it was 5A, but
yeah,
and so you can't go 5 miles without hitting a
yeah,
big school, and so the people you hire out, they're busy, because
yeah,
because they have there's so much work for them. So you're right. If you have a strong department, and when I was at Dulles, we everybody was on board to do everything.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and I don't want to slander Travis for the year that I was there, but that is not the case at that school at
yeah,
all. And
yeah.
so,
And when I was there, I mean, we were all coming up. Like we
yeah,
were every department there was brand new.
right,
The everybody was trying to find their footing. I think I was in a really fortunate position that the vast majority of my kids had started out with Tress and Brad at
yeah.
Austin.
You had a good
Uh,
transfer of group. Yeah,
and they I mean, we were for the first year I was there, first maybe even second year I was there, we felt like Austin High School light.
yeah,
There was
sure,
I mean, the way that we did things was, well, this is the way we did things at Austin. This is the way we did things. And we also had kids from Bush, but at the time,
yeah,
Bush's theater program wasn't as strong, I guess, and
as it is
so
now. Yeah,
they the I only had like a very few number of kids who had started out at Bush,
yeah,
but the dominant like what here's how we do things.
yeah,
And that group of sophomores that then uh, were the top group every year until they graduated, because they started out the school as sophomores. They were a really strong group, and by the time they were seniors, they knew how to lead. I mean, they
right,
were excellent leaders. Um, and it was one of those groups that when they left, you felt the void.
yeah,
But like I didn't really have to do a whole lot of like culture establishing. And even when I tried, it almost felt like there was pushback because they wanted to do things. And so I kind of let them,
yeah,
I didn't necessarily push anything on them, but everybody was still trying to find their footing. I think we were pretty lucky because the example that our kids had was Tress and Brad over at Austin, and so, but the dance teacher, she was fantastic, but she didn't have time to come choreograph our musical. The band directors, I think they did a good job. I think, but again, and he wanted to. I remember he really wanted to like be a part of the musical. He was like, but then he wouldn't get around to doing anything about it until really late. And it was an all student pit, and I'd have kids coming up to me going like, "Hey, I'm gonna be in the pit. When are we gonna start rehearsing?" And I was like, "You mean you haven't started rehearsing? Like we open the show next week, you know?"
yeah,
And so it was a little bit tricky. But again, it's not like I really blame anybody
right,
because it was so much of an upstart. But I think I musicals have always been one of those things. I like musicals. I've never considered myself like a musical person. Um, and one of the reasons I wanted to when I was at Paytown Sterling and I said, "Hey, could we do a musical?" It wasn't necessarily because I just really wanted to direct a musical. I really just feel strongly that that's part of their education. That's part of what, if you have the resources and if you can, do musicals, that's something you should be teaching kids and giving them that experience. But man, if you're at a school where they're just like, nah, we don't know, like I'm fine with that too. Like it's such a load of work that you know I was almost to the point where I was kind of like, you know what, maybe we'll just focus on like small musicals, you know. But our fall shows were fantastic. I
Yeah.
love. I always say it in our one act play. We had some success in one act when I was there. We advanced. We zone in that district, and we advanced from zone 3 out of the 4 years I was there, and then 1 year we got to area. So I considered that success because that's as much success as I've ever had in one act.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was. When I hear one of the thoughts that always pops up into my head is there's not enough love for fall shows. I don't think.
Yeah. Sure.
Fall shows are consistently some of my favorite to do.
Yeah.
I don't think they're scrutinized as much as one act or even musicals. And because there is no format or expectation, you kind of like go, well, what do we want to do? So this year, for instance, we did an outdoor, and because of COVID, it was like, let's do this outdoor. We did a Hamlet outside. And unlike a lot of schools, we were actually in class in person all year long. And the fine arts director actually called us in over the summer last year and was like, so let's figure out how we can do something safely. What is your plan on what you can do? And there was the idea of doing radio shows and film things. But I had already had this idea of doing Hamlet outdoors. And so that's what I said. I said, this is what I'd like to do. And I can stage it in such a way that kids are never really that close to each other. We will use masks. We'll incorporate the masks into the costumes. We'll do it outdoors. I'll cut Hamlet down as far as I can, so that the audience is not, around each other for a long period of time. Of course, I cut Hamlet down to 2 hours, which doesn't seem like that short, but
yeah,
man, there's nothing else you can squeeze out of that play.
It's like a 3.5 hour play.
Yeah. And I incorporated our senior AP English teacher to be our dramaturg, and he was like, talking about people from other disciplines who, are a little bit shocked at, you wanting to change things. He was like, at first, like, I don't think you can, he just was constantly like, you can't cut that. You can't cut that. And I'm like, we've got to, we can't have a 3-hour play, And so, but he eventually came around. He eventually started thinking like a theater person, was like, okay. Yeah, that works. But yeah, so like I told you, we only have very, very few males, and our strongest actors are all females. So I just decided I'm just going to cast this gender blind. We also have gender non-binary identifying students in our program. And so I was just like, I'm just going to cast it gender non-conforming, and basically I told the students, I said, whatever cast or whatever role I cast you in, that is the gender of that role. We're not going to like make, I cast Hamlet as a female, and I'm like, we're not going to like make her masculine. I changed all the pronouns in Hamlet to her. And I even, because it's Shakespeare and because you can do this with her, regardless of what some dramaturgs and some English teachers, might, balk at this, but because it's Shakespeare and it's in the public domain, you can change anything, you can adapt. And I started calling it an adaptation as opposed to a cutting. But we changed some words that just didn't quite fit with her being, with Hamlet being a female. For instance, there's a when she oh and Ophelia was a male, so we changed this. So when she comes in and sees Ophelia sitting there, and instead of the line calling her a nymph, she called him an Adonis. So like, changed it to a masculine and various things like that. We really played up on the gender the politics of it, like frailty thy name is woman, that takes on a different meaning when it's stated by a female. Whenever Claudius is trying to belittle Hamlet for being too much like a woman because he's crying over his father, that takes on a little bit different meaning when Hamlet is a woman. So anyway, just stuff like that in your fall show, you can kind of just play with it, and you don't have to worry about whether or not it's going to be received well by judges. Unlike a musical, you haven't paid, thousands of dollars to do the rights. Anyway, I just wanted to show some love for fall shows because they're always, without a doubt, like when I look back on all of my favorite shows that I've directed, they've usually been a fall show.
No, I'm a big believer in when I was at Dulles with Melanie Burke, we put almost all of our eggs in that basket, in the fall show basket, because we love doing that kind of stuff. Now it's funny, now I'm the school I'm going to, we do our quote fall show in April. So it's like we don't, we can't call it the fall show anymore. So, or I can't. But yeah, we flipped the season.
Is this school John Cooper? Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that, do they compete in one act or anything?
No, so they're a private school, so they could do TAPS, which is the one act for private schools,
Yes.
but they don't even do that. So they don't do Tommy too. They don't do any competitive anything. I think partially is the school is a math and science private school. Like it's very heavily focused on math and science, and so the talent we get isn't there to compete in theater. They're literally there to become engineers. So yes, those are the students that I will keep in touch with, because when I need to make my next paycheck, I'll reach out to them and say, hey, you're really wealthy.
Oh, I one of my favorite experiences post having a student is a student who is now an engineer. I had him at Travis, and he was like, I want to take you to an Astros game, and when I was down there one time, I was like my 20th high school reunion in Baytown, and I was like, hey, well, I'm going to be here for this. Let's go to a game. And so he like took me to a game, we sat in like nice seats, and it was fantastic. I love it.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you can, form those relationships with those kids who are going to do theater for sure, because you never know when one of them's going to win an award and thank you, but keep in touch with those math and science kids too.
Yeah.
I let my dog out of the
Yeah, no worries. I do the same thing every once in a while. Yeah, the I've got a student right now that wants to go to speaking of what we were talking about before I started recording, but I've got a student that wants to take me to a Rangers Astros game in the new Rangers in their new Globe Life. Oh, have you?
Yeah.
Already?
I went and saw the Astros. They lost.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I went and saw them. Yeah.
But I think he wants to buy the tickets. I should clarify that, but before I go and venture up there. So I want to get you out of here on. I wrote down a question very early in the conversation based on what you were saying about your background that I kind of wanted to know if you had an answer to. It could be a quick, super easy answer, but you mentioned that your dad was in theater, before you were even born. Did your dad encourage you to do theater, or discourage you to do theater and say, you don't want to do this because, or sure, go ahead and keep pushing forward?
Kind of both.
Yeah.
He was very encouraging to us growing up, and we did community theater. We were always at the theater. I don't think if he was trying to discourage us, he wasn't doing a very good job of it. But I do remember when we were, because my older brother was a theater major and my younger brother all three of us were theater majors. My older brother went on to be a marriage and family therapist. He's got his PhD in that, and he's a professor at a university. But my younger brother and I have both made that our career, theater in some way, shape, or form, our careers. And so no, he would always kind of joke like, why don't you go out and get a business degree? That would be much better if you got a business degree. And we always knew it was a joke because we're like, you don't have any room to talk.
Yeah.
But actually he went back. So he actually, when he stopped being a theater teacher, he went into the business world and he did sales. He was in Houston, doing sales for most of my life growing up. But then the company that he had worked for like 20 something years, it went under in the early 2000s, and he decided to go back to teaching. So he taught at Deer Park ninth grade campus for a year. He taught, his first job back was teaching with at the Carver Fine Arts Magnet with Rashonda Jones.
Yeah, Rashonda Jones. Yeah.
He worked with her. I think it was her first year there as well. But then he eventually landed at Lee College as the theater director at Lee College, and really, really loved that.
Yeah.
And so he retired just like a year or two ago, because he would basically was able to buy back the time that he had taught many, many years ago. He was still under that old system and taught, I think, for about 13 years in his 50s and 60s. And I know my parents, both my mom and my dad, very encouraging. I did not come from a family that valued or that put a huge premium on making a ton of money. It was always about like, do something you like, do something stable that's not gonna, cause you to have to come back and live with us.
Yeah.
And so teaching was always kind of where I saw myself because of that. It would give me an opportunity to do something I loved and also pay the bills, and one of the fortunate things about being a teacher during COVID, it was really hard to see friends of mine who were struggling financially, but my wife and I were both like, we know we're going to get a paycheck. It's going forward, there was obviously some fear about how Texas schools were going to get cut financially, but for the most part, we've been pretty secure and happy about that. Happy that we've been able to maintain our paychecks. They've always been really supportive of us and whatever we wanted to do.
Is there something you're going to take away from this past year that you're going to continue to work with as far as sort of adapting the COVID ways, if you will? I know you said that you were face to face the entire year, but is there, from some of the adaptations you made, is there anything that you kind of thought, oh, that's actually kind of a good way to go, and maybe we'll hold on to that in the future?
Well, we were face to face and online, so we did hybrid the entire year, which I did not like having both. I always felt like I would be much better at the Zoom thing if that's all I was doing.
Yeah, focus on that.
Yeah. Luckily, I had a student teacher in my classroom all year long. Abilene Christian has a program for a master's degree program for teachers who, once they finish out their bachelor's and then they spend their last year, the entire year in the classroom instead of just a semester. And so I had a student teacher all year who was basically like a third theater teacher for us. But she helped me a whole lot with that. In fact, her year was done like the first week of May. And after that, I was like, I don't know how to do this Zoom stuff, guys. Like, kids would be like, are you going to get online? Are we doing Zoom today? And I'd go, oh yeah, sorry. Mr. Hio was the one who always did this. So I was horrible at it. I hate to think what it would have been like if I had to do that all year long. But to answer your question, Google Classroom, was fantastic. I'm going to put every assignment up on Google Classroom. If you are, not able to be there, it's on Google Classroom. If you have assignments that you don't have turned in, it's all on Google Classroom. Go back and look at the stuff that you have not done yet, and it's on Google Classroom. That's certainly one thing. The tech theater classes were really tough to do on Zoom because we're building and stuff like that, and you go, well, you can't, unless you have all these tools at home. No, I don't think so. I'm not going to ship you lumber so that you can build me something. But I was able to put up an assignment up on Google Classroom and say like, okay, so you can't be here, but this is your assignment. Get it done, turn it in. And so Google Classroom definitely is something I learned about that I'll continue to use. The idea of cleaning up after ourselves after every class period, I think is, a good idea. Something we probably should have been doing all along. I think also one of the things that you and I often find ourselves, I don't know if debating, but like the Facebook groups where you get in and people tend to react very, kind of, I don't want to say overreact, but there's a lot of reactionary.
Yeah, passionate reactions.
Yeah, to things. And what I've found about myself is that, and I think this is true for all theater people, some people just need that first. Some people just need to get out their reaction first, and then they eventually come back to, oh, we can figure this out, And I think one of the things that I'm really taking from this year is that theater people are uniquely qualified and adept at flexibility and adapting and making it work. I have my sister-in-law was a theater major. She doesn't do theater anymore, but she tells me she likes to hire theater people, because she says that's, in fact, when she would go into job interviews and they would say, why do you have a bachelor's degree in theater? How has that helped you? And she says, theater people know how to get things done and they will stick with it until it's done. And she said that, no other discipline teaches you quite as well how to adapt, how to be flexible and still make it amazing. And I think nothing has shown me that more than this year, whether it was the outdoor, Shakespeare that we did, or I had a student who did a film version of Actor's Nightmare, and then the myriad of things that I saw from across the state of videotape performances and shows that were adapted, just theater people kind of amaze me, and it's that has really, I think, been the biggest takeaway is that really there's nothing we can't do.
Minor